Tonight, celebrating my heritage, St. Patrick's Day.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We'll see how it goes for me. The night before that, I had to I caretaker this guy, and
Mm.
like their dog was bleeding or something.
Mm.
Like they called me at like 4 in the morning. So doubling down on the 4 o'clock or on the 4 a.m. wake ups. So
Damn, I feel that.
so see. Other than night of that, my brothers threw a party at my house, so I was laying in the house till like 2 a.m. But I slept in that one. That
Did you
morning.
participate?
Did a good time.
Love me a good party.
I haven't partied for 3 weeks, so it was definitely I spent time wisely. Gonna get KSON concert on Saturday. Yeah, that'll
Mm.
be fun. It's
Oh
my
yeah,
brother's birthday.
love me a good time.
But I've been making a permanent shift away from you, not because of anything to do, because I like being able to see the whole class.
Oh, okay.
I feel more connected, so I don't want you to feel like something.
We're disconnected.
Yeah, now I can, before I was just like, it was just you, me, and the screen.
Well, you know what? I have a lot of shitty things going on in my life right now, so that does make me sad. Thank you.
It's supportive to your life, I will definitely move up closer.
It's okay.
I know, that's we're a family. Sometimes family,
Moves apart.
it moves closer together,
Yeah.
even if it hurts one of my life.
Yep. It's all good.
Yeah, but I wish you much ease and hope your thing gets situated.
Yeah, I wish you luck in your journey on that side of the classroom.
No, I didn't mean like that. I feel like I'm getting broken up right now. Dang. This is not boding well for my career.
Sorry, I'm just gonna take care of something really quick. Said what?
You can't.
Okay.
Good morning, Cody. How are you?
Fantastic. How are you?
Happy Monday.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna be seated for racing.
Really?
Is this week ACS week?
So this week we need to figure out together this, okay, well, first and foremost, not I don't know the reasoning behind it, but Jan is, from what I understand from his message, he's no longer going to be here anymore. He won't be in class. He has a flight today, and then he said he's going back to Australia.
Some
So,
family stuff going on, right?
well, there was like the storm that was there. I don't quite know if it has to do with that or if it has to do with like maybe the visa, because that's a complicated process. So
Oh, yeah.
not sure, but it'll be one less in class, whether it's on Zoom or on Zoom or on in person. He won't be here, so just a note for everybody.
You
Say what?
send our wishes.
Oh yeah, I will.
Man, you just got. Oh, shit.
Oh gosh, more people.
Wait, right? The next, your next.
Yeah,
All right. Today, today is going to be one of those day or this week in general. It's just a review of everything that we have gone over the last 4 weeks. So with that being said, the slides for this week is just a single title slide for each day. Week 1 review, week 2 review, week 3 review, and so on. So there's no actual material to be covered this week. So what I need from you guys is sort of direction on what we want to go over again. Obviously, we won't be able to go as in depth because we're covering a whole week in a single day. But if we want weight and balance, we could do a weight and balance example. If we want to read METARs, we could do that. If weather theory is a little tricky, I can go over the weather theory PowerPoint. Aerodynamics, whatever it may be, whatever you guys want to do. We don't have to stick to a plan this week. It's just covering and reviewing what we feel like we need to. We could go over paved checklist and how it should be very detailed and thorough and discussed about on your check ride. Whatever you guys are feeling or wanting to do. So are there any options that people want to throw out? Don't feel shy. Who cares if everybody else understands it and you don't? If we want to review something, yell it out.
I think we had, what was the idea of like doing one of the quiz or doing some questions just to kind of maybe like suss out where.
Oh, yeah, okay, we'll do
Work
that.
out. I know I was looking over the systems again, and that's like, a lot of that has become fuzzy.
Okay,
So the aerodynamics is, for me, is more conceptually, it's easy to understand. It's, maybe just a quick peruse, but like some of the system stuff, being prepared for what we might need in a check ride.
yes,
Maybe just we go through the diagram.
yes, okay, let's do that. So we'll start off with reviewing these systems. Is everybody cool with that? So we'll go over like the main ones, like the fuel, the electrical, the just basic sort of overview of the engine, the Arhango 4, and then we'll talk about the starter and ignition system. Those will be like the main ones that you really need to know. So we'll do that, and anytime that we have left over, we will go over written exam questions from King's School and just go through it together as a class and talk about it and see what we get right, what we don't get right. And then that'll be more stuff we can review. The Sling email is still not logging in, so just give me a second to try to find these PowerPoints on my email. I can grab my laptop quick and send it over so we can go to the systems.
So I think it's also. Your water pump. The spark next to radiator.
It's beautiful. Beautiful. All right. For those on Zoom, I'm sharing. Actually, no, just kidding.
Yeah.
Bear with me. I'm hacking into the mainframe right now. All right, can everybody see this? I'm not going to put it in slideshow view so it's easier for us to bounce around. How does everybody feel with the primary and secondary flight controls? What are the primary flight controls? Cool. What about secondary? Trims, flaps. Cool. On some other planes, not on ours, there might be other secondary controls like the spoilers and speed brakes, stuff like that. But for us, it's just going to be the flaps and trim. Are the flaps and trim mechanically or electrically powered? Cool. So when given the question of describing the Sling engine, you can use the acronym RTANGO 4, meaning Rotax 912IS, horizontally posed cylinders, air/liquid cooled, naturally aspirated, gear reduction box. What's does anybody remember the gear reduction ratio?
0.43 to 1. It's right here.
No.
Oh, it's on the board?
No, it's.
Oh, it is. Okay.
It is on the board.
Well, that's good. We weren't using those though.
Good. So the Arhango 4 is the acronym that sort of overview of the system. So the Rotax 912 IS, Rotax is the manufacturer, the 912 is that model, and then the IS is referring to fuel injected as opposed to the ULS, which is the carburetor. Horizontally opposed cylinders. This helps reduce vibration. It also helps save space within the cowling, so we don't have a super tall cowling. If you look over at the engine display over there, you'll see on this side, there's the two sort of square green cylinders on this side. The other two that are horizontally opposed are on the other side. So that's what that's referring to, and that's how that looks. Air and liquid cooled, so we have air coming into the engine that's cooling, and we have oil and coolant that helps cool the engine. Does anybody remember the purpose of oil? There's like 3 or 4 purposes.
Clean.
And seal, yep. Clean, cool, lubricate, seal. Naturally aspirated, what about that?
There's no. This forced air, so like there's no turbos or superchargers.
Yep, the air just naturally flows in, that ambient air, that outside air flows into the engine to cool. Gear reduction 2.43 to 1, what is that ratio between?
Whatever. For every 2.43 revolutions within the engine, propeller turns 1 time.
And that's what is turning the propeller, what component of the engine?
It's a camshaft driven.
So crankshaft. Crankshaft is going to be what the propeller is attached to. The camshaft driven is referring to the oil pump. Yeah, exactly. We just don't want the propeller to over rotate and cause damage. So that's why we have that reduction system. Oil system, dry sump force lubrication. What does dry sump mean?
That the oil is stored outside of the engine in an external container. It needs to be pumped back in before starting.
Cool. And then what about a wet sump? What would that be?
There would be like an oil pan on the bottom and all the oil would sit underneath the motor.
Yep, so that's why in the Cessnas, they have the super long dipstick like you do in a car, so.
Question about our Hangar 4, on section 1 of the POH 1.4.4, page 1-6, it states that the max of horsepower, 100 horsepower at 5,000 RPM for a max of 5 minutes, and 93 horsepower at 5,500 RPM for continuous. Where did we get these numbers here, 92.5 and 98.5? Is that just a rounded down version for safety per SOP?
So you're talking about these numbers?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the POH that you're seeing now is the new POH.
Okay.
It's updated. I don't think they have the old POH in there anymore, but they have the new POH. So there's some changes that they made. Manufacturer probably did tests and determined the new numbers.
So
So the new POH like just came out.
okay, on the check ride, should they use these numbers if asked, or? I.
Yes.
Disregard those?
Yep. Disregard these and do the new numbers. So. I haven't gotten a chance to update it, but the new POH just came out, so whatever they put in there is what we go by.
Just want to confirm.
Cool. Thanks for pointing that out, because I haven't really read through the new one
And
yet.
then, even this for the, I think digital book they've been sending out, but the paper book hasn't published yet, right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so you only have the digital for now. And I don't know when the the paper version will be available. Cool. And then
Do
for
the DP, no, sorry. Do the DP know about those, or you just gotta,
if you want my honest answer, probably no. So
okay,
that's something that the DPs will have to become like acclimated to and informed on. So I doubt they know that.
same thing with the, like a check, because recently we have got the checklist,
Yes.
so, use the whatever is comfortable at this point, since.
No, you use the new one because the old one is now not effective. So the new checklist is what you use, regardless of what the DP says. Oh, I like the old one. Nope, this is the standard. So.
Okay, so basically just inform.
Mhm. Yep. 4 cylinders we talked about, and then 4 stroke. What are the 4 strokes? Mm-hmm.
Compression,
Mm-hmm.
combustion, or exhaust.
Yep, combustion and then exhaust. Cool. That combustion is between what 2 things?
Air and fuel.
And that's controlled by the,
ECU,
yes,
a fuel injector.
fuel injectors, which is controlled by ECU. Cool. Any questions on Arhango 4, general overview of the engine? Nope. Cool. All right. So fuel system, just some basics of the fuel system. So we have the fuel capacity of 19.8 gallons per tank, making it 39.6 total. Unusable fuel is half a gallon per side, so 1 total. And that's going to be due to the fuel that's in the fuel lines or at the bottom of the tank. Our fuel burn is 3.5 gallons per hour on average, but we do have a chart in the POH that shows the fuel burn at different RPM settings. But we use 5 gallons per hour for safety and ease of calculation, just to give us a little bit of a buffer when doing our calculations. The average fuel pressure should be between 40.5 and 46.5 PSI. If you see anything lower or higher than that, it will start showing or indicating yellow on your fuel pressure gauge. And then we use a combination of avgas 100 low lead and MoGas 91 octane. What color would pure avgas 100 low lead be?
Light blue.
Light blue. So because we use that MoGas avgas combination, you're still going to see a very, very slight tint of blue, but it's going to look a little more clear than it does blue. If you just got avgas, it'd be pretty blue, so you would see it like visually. Any questions about the fuel system basics?
What was the general fuel pressure that you would see? Was it 43, 44?
I would say like around the 43 or 44 range. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So the life cycle. So I'm just gonna read through this and then we'll go and look at the diagram. So we have 2 fuel tanks left and right that are located near the fuselage on the inside of the wing. Only 1 tank can be selected at a time, unlike the Cessnas, which use both. It's because they are gravity fed and ours is powered by a fuel pump. So we can only have left, right, or off selected. In case any of you guys are hopefully not in this situation, but if you do end up in an emergency situation where you have to turn off the fuel, you can't just turn it to off. You have to pull pull like the little circle, red circle in the middle, the little knob, and then rotate it. So it doesn't just turn left and right like it does between the tanks. You actually have to pull it up and then rotate. So I know in emergency situations, you don't think straight and you might be like, oh, why isn't it turning? Why isn't it turning? Well, you just have to lift up and turn. The fuel runs through 3 different filters before reaching its engine. The fuel flows through the engine from right to left, and roughly 20 gallons of fuel flow through the engine per hour. I know some people have said, what was it, 22 or 23? Somebody was saying that a different instructor said that, but roughly 20 gallons of fuel flow through the engine per hour. Doesn't mean that it's burning 20 gallons per hour, it just means 20 gallons are going through the system. The fuel becomes pressurized after reaching the fuel pumps. So our fuel diagram, oops. Our fuel diagram is going to be right here. So starting from the tank that is selected, it's going to pass through the initial strainer. There's an initial fuel strainer by each tank. So regardless of what tank you have selected, it'll pass through the initial strainer. From there, it goes through the fuel selector and then through the gascolator, which is the second filter. It's also the lowest point in the fuel system. So if you do find water or other contaminants, most likely it'll be in the gascolator, but that doesn't mean that you can't find it in the wing tanks as well. But the reason you would find water there is because water is denser than fuel. So when you do sump it, if there is water in there, it'll be at the bottom and then the fuel will be sitting on top. From there, it'll pass through the fuel pump, which are electrically driven and powered by the ECU. We have a main and aux for redundancy purposes. From there, it's not on here, but after the fuel pumps, as we talked about right after, is where it becomes pressurized. So there is going to be a pressure sensor directly after the fuel pumps. From there, it's going to pass through the fine filter, which filters out any very small debris or contaminants. So it is the most susceptible to become blocked if larger debris does make it through. Over time, it could block the fine filter, which is why we have a bypass plate, which will allow fuel to flow through that rather than getting clogged and stopping the fuel flow. Then, as we know, it passes through the engine from right to left. And before it goes back to the selected fuel tank, there is going to be a pressure relief valve. So if the pressure is high, it doesn't send high pressure fuel back into the tank. Any questions about the fuel system? When drawing it out on a check ride, like I mentioned, draw the fuel pressure sensor and draw the pressure relief valve. And then the other few things you should draw are the fuel vents on each tank and the fuel sumps on each tank, as well as the gascolator. What's the purpose of a fuel vent?
Pressure equalization and overflow.
Cool. Any questions on the fuel system or any sort of scenarios that you might encounter with the fuel system?
If you are a mid-flight and you change from left to right, does that disrupt fuel flow? Or is there enough in the system that it's?
Yeah, so it won't disrupt it. Being said that everything is operating normally, there should be an internal sort of timer within the plane that when you fly, from engine start, it's going to start that timer. And it's going to give you a notification every hour to switch to fuel tanks. So you will have to do that. A good habit to practice when switching a fuel tank Don't be in a climb or descent, don't be in the middle of a maneuver, wait until you're straight and level. And then when you do switch to fuel tanks, look for an emergency landing spot. You should be doing that all the time. Like if you're doing cross-country flights, always have an emergency landing spot in mind. But specifically when changing the fuel tanks, look for one, pull up the engine diagram page, switch to fuel tanks, and then verify that the fuel pressure is still green and flowing. Also having, so our checklist says to in cruise flight to turn off our auxiliary pump. The reason for that is having both pumps running makes it puts the pumps closer to its like failure point. You know, like if you leave a laptop on for hours and hours and hours and you never shut down your laptop, that's gonna decrease its lifespan. So the reason why they want us to turn off the aux pump in cruise flight is to elongate the pump's lifespan. With that being said, though, if your main pump does fail or it's not working mid-flight and you have that aux pump off because you follow the checklist, your engine is going to shut off. If you turn both pumps off, it literally takes like seconds. Like it's very, very, very quick. Like you have to put it back on immediately, otherwise the engine will shut off. So most instructors here, I think, like to leave the aux pump on for the entire flight, just in case the main pump does fail. You don't have to worry about having an engine failure and having to restart it in flight. So, yeah, going off your question, it is safe to switch to fuel selectors. You never want to leave it on one because then that one becomes low, and then the other tank could be pretty heavy and full, so that'll kind of offset your balance between like the left and right side, especially if whatever side is the fuller tank. If you have a heavier instructor or passenger, then like it could really sort of offset it. Yeah, always look for a landing spot and always make sure both tanks are on straight and level flight and check the fuel pressure when you switch it. Any other questions about the fuel system?
On the checklist, should I turn the aux off and choose? Because, I mean, that's what the checklist says.
It is what it says. I personally would say no on my check ride with Alex. I don't remember doing that. For you two, I would talk to, oh, well, there's Ethan.
Yeah.
When you did your check ride with Alex, did you turn aux pump on for the cruise checklist or no?
No.
And you didn't say anything about it?
Turn it on for cruise.
You had it on for cruise, or did you follow the checklist and turn it off? And he didn't say anything about that? Okay, yeah. So I think he would agree that redundancy is a little better than burning the fuel, the life of the fuel pump, so.
Right.
Cool. So as we mentioned, right to left. So it's gonna flow through cylinders 1 and 3, which are gonna be on the right, and then through cylinders 4 and 2 on the left, before going through the pressure relief valve and then back to the selected tank. Any questions on the fuel diagram? So we'll talk a little bit about the air intake and fuel injection, since those are technically a part of the fuel system in a way. So the air intake, there's going to be outside air, naturally aspirated, meaning it just flows into the engine compartment without assistance. But it's going to be supplied to the engine without the supercharger or turbocharger. Air flows directly from the air intake to the air box or the manifold, where it passes through an air filter. The filtered air is then sent through the manifolds to each of the cylinders, 2 fuel injectors where the fuel and air are mixed before entering the cylinder. So here's a diagram of the outside air flowing through the air intake to the air box or the manifold, where it then passes through an air filter. And then there's going to be 4 manifolds. So they're going to be like black hoses. I don't know if there's any on that diagram over there, that are then going to bring them to the fuel injectors. Fuel injectors are then going to mix the air and fuel combination to cause ignition. As we talked about earlier, the fuel injectors are controlled by the ECU, the engine control unit, which is the brain of the engine. It's the core of the engine. It does it automatically through different input variables. So depending on where throttle is positioned, the engine speed, like what it's signaling, the intake air temperature, the ambient pressure, the manifold pressure, and the exhaust temperature. So those are all variables that the ECU takes into account when determining how much fuel for the fuel injectors to inject for that fuel and air mixture to be ignited. Yeah, so the air density, which is calculated in the air box, so it's just gonna be right here, determines how much fuel quantity is needed per period. And then from there, those spark plugs are going to create the spark, which ignites that fuel and air mixture. Good? All right, oil system. So as we talked about, it cools, cleans, lubricates, and seals the engine and its components. So it's the dry sump forced lubrication. So we have the external reservoir outside the engine, which then has to force oil back into the engine to lubricate. Approximately holds 3.5 liters. When the oil is below 50 degrees Celsius, the oil filter is bypassed due to the increased viscosity of the oil. Significant throttle settings must not be used during this period as it may cause damage. Surplus oil emerging from the points of lubrication gather at the bottom of the crankcase, from where it's forced back to the oil reservoir by piston blow by gas. The oil used is the automotive grade API SG synthetic or semi-synthetic. So we pretty much use like car oil. Yeah, and the reason we have the dry sump system is to help save space. If we had the wet sump, there'd be the pan at the bottom, like JT mentioned. It would give it the cowling. It would require a lot bigger of a cowling. Found in the POH, which may be different because they updated the new POH. But here are the parameters for the oil temperature and oil pressure. It's good to know. System should indicate the oil pressure temperature in yellow rather than green if it's starting to reach the above or below these parameters, and then go into red when it's outside these parameters. They're found in the oil limitations in the POH. So here's our diagram, 4 simple parts. So we have the reservoir, which oil is pulled from by the oil pump, which is powered by the camshaft. It then passes through a filter before being directed to the engine. After passing through the engine, the oil goes back to the reservoir. So if that oil pump for some reason goes out, then we will no longer be drawing oil from the reservoir through the engine, and not cleaning, cooling, lubricating, or sealing, which then inherently will most likely cause damage to the engine and probably shut off. So oil is very important. There's a, I just thought of this, but there's a joke between, there's a war going on between Tacoma drivers and Jeep drivers, right? You know, we hate each other, but why do Tacomas last longer than Jeeps? Because Tacoma drivers are actually smart and have common sense and know to get their oil changed on a regular basis. Jeep drivers can't do that. Are there any Jeep owners in here? No?
I just towed last night.
Exactly. There we go. See? But yeah, get your oil change. Oil is very important. Why do we burp the engine? I know it's on the screen, but why do we have to do that?
To move oil around that's like stuck in certain places back to the reservoir. So
Yep.
you can get a count.
Yep, so turning the propeller, there's gonna be air coming from the pistons, which are gonna then build up and push any resting oil back into the reservoir to give us the accurate reading. Any questions on the oil system before we move on? Who understands the fuel system and the oil system? Who does not understand the oil or fuel system? Cool. All right, electrical system. So this is going to be very important for the Sling because a lot of things rely on the electrical system. We have two internal generators, generator A and generator B. They're both going to be producing alternating current, which is then converted to a direct current by the rectifier regulators. The power generated by generator A goes to the ECU, which is going to control the two fuel pumps, 8 spark plugs, and 8 fuel injectors. The power from generator B is going to go to the battery, which powers the main bus, which then controls things like flaps, trim, lights, radios, everything like that, avionics, autopilot. So we have a lot that relies on the battery. As we talked about before, I think some of you may not have been in here, but we had a kind of in-depth conversation that probably lasted longer than it needed to about what a rectifier regulator is. So the rectifier regulator can be broken down into two parts, the rectifier and the regulator. Essentially, one converts the power, so from AC to DC, and then the other maintains that voltage and then passes it wherever it needs to go in the system. So it doesn't like step it down at all. It still maintains that same power. And then each of the equipment uses what they need from it. Yes.
Can I say?
Yeah.
So I know that we have like in diagram we would draw a tube, but is it like the one regulator has a separate tube or is it two separate?
Two separate like rectifier regulators. Yeah, so it's gonna be, I don't know if I have a picture on it in here.
Because like the ones we see in the left column, when we open the left column, we see the big one right there.
Yeah, so it should be, there's gonna be the fuse box, which
Oh, it says the fuse
hold the fuse box. It's gonna be that one with the blue tape on it, actually. The one behind it, yeah.
Oh, the big ones. The big ones. So
Yeah, so the rectifier regulators are gonna be those silver boxes on either side of the fuse box. There's gonna be two of them, one for generator A, one for generator B. So yeah, this is what our electrical system diagram looks like and how you can draw it out. You can fine tune it and, draw it with whatever way you want to. I usually like to draw the alternating current kind of as little zigzag lines, just to differentiate the difference between the AC and DC. And then you can label on the ECU side, the two fuel pumps, 8 spark plugs, 8 fuel injectors. And then on the battery, draw out the main bus with flaps, trim, autopilot, avionics, lights, things like that. Does anybody remember when we were talking about the battery? How many volts the battery is, how many volts is produced by the generators?
It's 12-volt battery, but with the generators putting power to it, it's up to about 14.
Yep, yep. Everybody hear that? Cool. So our generator is going to, it's gonna be one sort of generator looking thing like this, but there's gonna be two internally within this. They're gonna be located at the back of the engine. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on there, but where this yellow ring is, that's where it's located. Can everybody see that? And then it's gonna be inside, it's gonna look like this. So there's gonna be 24 stators, which are gonna be the magnets wrapped in copper wire that surround a single magnet attached to the crankshaft. So as that crankshaft turns, that single magnet attached to the crankshaft is also going to turn in between these 24 stators. And that relationship between the spinning magnet and then the magnets wrapped in copper wiring is going to, I guess, take magnetic energy and turn it to then mechanical energy of the engine actually running.
So both generators are in that.
Yes. Cool. So as we talked about the rectifier regulators, rectifier is a device that converts an oscillating two-directional alternating current into a single directional current, direct current DC. And then the regulator is any electrical device that maintains the voltage of a power source within an acceptable limit. And as we saw, they're located on both sides of the fuse box, the little silver boxes on either side. So we have the rectifier regulator to convert the power, but also to maintain the voltage so we don't lose any of that power when we send it off to the battery or the ECU. Cool. Yeah, so kind of going back a little bit about the engine, the EMS or engine management system is ultimately the overseeing like entity of the engine. It's going to take care of like ignition control, fuel injection, fault detection, and generator management. Within the EMS, there's different components such as wires, sensors, different harnesses, and the ECU. The ECU being the brain of the engine management system. So you can think of the engine management system as our entire body, us as people, and then the ECU is going to be our brain that processes and controls the important things within the engine. Here's just sort of a picture, right, of the EMS. We have the ECU as the central core, controlling the fuel pumps, injectors, and the ignition coils. 2 spark plugs and 2 fuel injectors per cylinder, since we have 4 cylinders. Going more in depth about the ECU, engine control unit. So it's the core of the EMS, and it consists of 2 modules. There are 2 computer modules, lane A and lane B, not to be confused with generator A and generator B. They're separate. During normal operation, both lanes are engaged or on for redundancy, just like kind of with the fuel pumps, keep both on for redundancy. When it's controlled by lane A, lane B ensures that the engine operation can be maintained after a failure, and the ECU automatically controls or selects a lane to control the engine. Lane A is the primary computer, lane B is a secondary computer. They're on the instrument panel, 2 switches with a light. The lights tell the condition of the 2 computers. So just like the check engine light in your car, if you see a lane light on, it's telling you that something is wrong. We can then go into the settings page and view FADEC. FADEC is going to be like plugging that the ODB2 sensor into your car at AutoZone, and it'll tell you what exactly is wrong. You can only see what's wrong when the check engine light is on. So same with the lanes, if the lane lights are not on, we can't see FADEC and what it's telling us to do, or telling us what's wrong. But once those lane lights are on, we could go in and view FADEC and see what the issue is.
Do AMPs still charge you for a diagnostic before fixing the issue?
Oh gosh, I don't know, probably, I would assume so. But yeah, most of the time it's just the issue with the sensor, which is why we can cycle the lane off and turn it back on, and then that light will go off. A lot of times on startup, on colder days, both the lanes might be on. The engine's still running, might feel a little rough. That's just because it could be a sensor issue. So one at a time, cycle it off, turn it back on, the light should go off. You should feel the engine get a little smoother. And then if the other light's on, do the same thing, cycle it off, cycle it on. The light should go off and you should start feeling the engine run a lot smoother and see all of our instruments within the engine page. There is going to be I don't think I have it, it might be at the end of this PowerPoint. But we'll get around to that. Yeah, so lane lights are the ECU's only way of telling us if something is wrong. Could be flashing or could be solid. In flight, if both lanes come on, don't cycle one off because at this point you don't know if there's actually an issue with the engine and you don't know which one is the working one and which one is the faulty one. So if you have lane A and B on, and let's just say lane B is there's actually an issue, and you decide to cycle lane A, the only working lane off, then you could lose your engine. So in that case, you just want to land as soon as possible. You don't need to go do an off-field landing, but just get back to an airport as soon as possible. Yeah, so essentially each lane controls one spark plug and one fuel injector in each cylinder. The ECU can and will change the number of spark plugs and fuel injectors it controls. It could be any combination. We don't know about it. The ECU just does that automatically. But here we have 4 spark plugs and 4 fuel injectors on either side, controlled by lane A or lane B. Any questions with the electrical system so far, specifically with the lanes?
Just go back to the lane slide.
Mhm.
So. Correctly, so lane B, it says it has 4 total spark plugs, it has 2 per cylinder, so lane B is running either 2 and 4. Or 1 and 3.
Yeah,
or
so that's,
1 per cylinder.
this is saying generally speaking,
Oh, they're running simultaneously without an issue.
yes.
Okay.
But this is generally speaking, as we know, the ECU can, if it wanted to dedicate lane A to control all of them, we just will never know about that. We don't have any gauges that will tell us that. It's just sort of a trust system.
And these A and B lanes, they're essentially part of the ECU system, so there's not an external loop anywhere else, it's just part of that.
Yeah, so the way, and I usually avoid doing this because lanes are a very complicated sort of thing to understand, but literally just computer modules. They're sort of computer modules, but when you draw it out, this is making it way worse. When you draw it out, so we have the generator, rectifier regulator, direct current, ECU. You could, if you wanted to, draw it out like that to sort of signify lane A and lane B are under the ECU's control. But then that might sort of spark the question of, oh, well, go ahead and tell me about the lanes. What are they? Like, and that's, a conversation I don't want to have on a check ride, so.
So you say also same with like the battery, Be like, oh yeah, just go to the battery, you don't have to do the 6 things and the main.
No, I would do that. Like, I would still write it out like you have the 2 pumps, 8 spark plugs, 8 fuel injectors, and then on this side. Do like a little. Maybe write like the autopilot, avionics, flaps, trim, lights, like radio, like all that stuff. Yeah, so I'm still definitely talking about that and mention the main bus. But on the ECU side, just mention the 2 pumps, 8 spark plugs, 8 fuel injectors. If you're feeling confident and really want to show them you know what you're talking about, you could mention the lane A and lane B, and then go in and talk about the things we did. But check rides are, you answer the question in detail and specific, but don't start mentioning things that you don't necessarily need to mention. Yeah, like Austin, we were watching in preparation for his check ride on next Monday. We were watching like a mock check ride on YouTube, and the examiner was asking about currency or something like that. And then the student mentioned proficiency. He's like, yeah, he's like, so, regarding like currency and proficiency, like the currency is going to be this. And then the examiner was like, oh, since you mentioned proficiency, tell me like what's the difference between proficiency and currency? And it's a simple answer. Currency is regarding the safety in a legality sense. Proficiency is regarding safety in sort of a comfort level, personal minimum sense. But that's an extra question that may not have been asked if the student didn't mention that like buzzword. So same with these. Good. All right, so the battery, we have the one main battery, which is the 12 volt in the engine compartment. Battery provides power to the airframe as well as charging 2 instrument backup batteries. First is going to be located in the Garmin G5 that has about an 8-hour battery life when fully charged. During normal operation, the aircraft's main battery is always charging the G5's battery. The second battery is for the Garmin G3X. This acts like the G5 backup battery. It's marked as EFIS backup, and this will allow the EFIS to run even if the aircraft's main battery gives out. This is always charged throughout the main battery. So we're going to have the backup for the G5, backup for the G3X, the main battery, then not necessarily associated with the electrical system's charge. We'll have a 4th battery, which is going to be the ELT, which is its own separate battery. And just out of curiosity, I just found out about this, but supposedly the ELT battery is located under the right seat. So the CFI side seat, if you lift up the seat, that ELT battery will be there. The rest are located within the engine compartment and or like instrument panel. So this is a simplified diagram from the components of the like the Garmin manuals, the Garmin like electrical like wiring manual, which is very, very complicated to read. But starting from the battery, we have battery, which is going to power EFIS 1, the G3X, which one of the components is the AHRS and ADC. Does anybody remember what those 2 things stand for?
System.
Mm-hmm. And then the ADC, air data computer. And then from the battery, which is powered through the main bus, we have the avionics, autopilots, all these things, and then ephus 2 to the G5. Any questions or concerns or complaints regarding the fuel system, oil system, or electrical system thus far?
Pull back just the battery,
This,
next to diagram.
this?
Yep.
Cool. There's essentially just a diagram of the things that the battery provides power to.
So I'm just looking for the fuel system
Yep.
and the POH, looking at the diagram, it mentions a heat pump between the selector valve and the gascolator, but I never see that mentioned in any of the other diagrams.
So this might be one of the new things they added. Don't know if it was in the old POH. What page is it on so we all can find it?
7-20.
7-24.
This is new.
This is new. You said it's where? After the gascolator or before?
Before, between the selector valve and the gascolator.
Alright.
Paper POH doesn't list it.
And then what was it called?
It's I, so that would be.
Oh yeah, the
The system diagram key down below calls it a feed pump.
heat pump. A facet posiflow fuel pump. And that is I. That is a good question. Yeah, this is new. I can find out and get back to you guys on this one. Because I am not entirely sure the purpose of it.
What's it called again?
So on page 7-25, it's in the fuel system diagram key, it's I, the feed pump. But on 7-24, it refers to it as the facet posiflow fuel pump. Because there's also listed the Rotax fuel pump so that facet posiflow fuel pump is different from the Rotax fuel pump. So yeah, I'll get back to you on that one. Thanks for pointing that out.
Good question. Thanks.
Something new to the POH that they didn't, okay. Never mind, Carlos. Could you go and hold up the Rotax fuel pump? So for those of you that are here, this is what the Rotax fuel pump is going to look like. There's two in there, the main and aux. Normally it'll have the silver cover on it, so you won't actually see those. Those will be internal, but that's what it's going to look like with the insides of the fuel pump cover, main and aux.
Are we getting something added to the fuel pump to boost its production? Something like that.
That could be the
Uh,
thing he was talking about, the feed pump.
Okay.
Yeah, because I haven't even heard of that. So there's like a lot of probably new stuff that hasn't.
Been discussed or
Yeah,
disclosed?
let's see if it says anything in here. Feed pump. Okay, I'm just gonna read this to everybody. This is on 7-23, page 4. The aircraft makes use of a fuel tank located in the leading edge of each wing. The tank is equipped with a vent underneath the wing and a finger screen at fuel pickup. The drain valve is located at the lowest point of the tank to collect possible contaminants such as water. The tank outlet leads to the fuel selector valve situated on the central console in the cockpit. From there, it flows through a feed, okay, it doesn't really explain anything, but it flows through a feed pump and then through a gascolator. Then it leads through 2 electric fuel pumps, then through a fuel filter sensor, which displays it on the ethos. So it doesn't really. On page 7-25, under the main auxiliary pumps, the main aux pumps are powered via the EMS/ECU. As long as power is available to the EMS/ECU, both pumps can be selected/operated, irrespective of the master switch status. The feed pump is powered via the main battery. It will only receive power if the master switch is on. The main pump and feed pump are wired to the same switch. This means that when the main pump is switched on, the feed pump will turn on as well if the master is on. So I guess from what I'm hearing, it's just an added pump to help with the fuel flow. Probably again for redundancy purposes. It helps feed the fuel to through the gascolator and then through the main pump and aux pump, which then is like the primary source of pumpage.
Yeah. So how does that one get powered on?
Huh?
So how does that one get powered on?
That's going to be through the ECU. Yeah, or the EMS and then ECU.
And the other one was the main.
The other one was saying the feed pump is powered through the battery, so unless the master is on, it won't work. So I guess it would just be for redundancy to have the 2 of them. Now, that being said, if both main and aux pump fail, will the feed pump be able to pump fuel through the plane like normal? Probably not. I think kind of just based by the name, it's a way to feed fuel from the fuel tanks to the main aux pump, which then are the primary source of pumping the fuel through the engine.
Yeah, the key was the feed pump as a 4 to 7 pound PSI pump, so it's not enough to feed the.
Yeah, so it's just very it's just probably to assist with the main pumps and getting the fuel started through the fuel system. Because if you think about it, where the pumps are located, like there's a bunch of like the fuel has to go through. It goes through the initial strainer, goes through the fuel selector, goes through the gascolator, and then to the fuel pumps. So having that extra little 7 PSI pump probably assists with pulling that fuel out the tank to get it started in the system. Cool. Any questions? Anything? Cool.
So that was something that is new or
Yes.
existing, okay,
Yes.
so essentially gone through all the plans, put that
Well, I don't know about all that.
in.
Unless Santa Claus came to town in the middle of the night and put in this feed pump in every plane.
Maybe they do it like when it's the 100-hour.
Yeah, it was either something like that where like, yeah, it's 100-hour annual they added in, or it's been something that's already been in the system and just not listed as a component. I don't know. But it would be nice if our planes actually had it because it is in our fuel diagram. So thank you for pointing that out because then that sort of maybe changes the way we draw our fuel diagram. No, right before, what is it, before the gascolator, you add that feed pump in there. So,
Wasn't word going around that in summer, we're trying to get the slings approved for IMC flight? And if that is true, would you think that all of these new additions would come into effect?
yeah, so that, what that is called Mosaic, MOSAIC. And it's sort of like an initiative by the FAA directly, which is going to sort of change the game for all light sport aircraft. Because the whole thing with IMC isn't a sling thing, it's an FAA categorization of light sport. Our weight of 1,320 pounds or 600 kilograms. Another component of that mosaic will be to bump it up to like 1,580 pounds, which our planes could 100% do. We are more than capable of going above 1320. It's just the FAA's regulations regarding the light sport. So yes, this would be very, very major, and they're talking about getting it done sometime in 2025. Does that mean it'll be in a month, or does that mean it's going to be December 31st? I don't know. Sometime in 2025. It's the government, so a lot of that takes a lot of time. And then after that happens, or gets signed and approved, the time it takes for implementing it will probably take some additional time. So if it was up to me, I would say sign the mosaic and get it implemented tomorrow. Let's go fly IMC. But I don't know. That's the FAA's discretion. So, but it is good. I would definitely like go and like research and look it up. There's like a lot of good information and a lot of really good things that will benefit the light sport community. So cool.
Yeah.
Man, good questions today.
Light phones are cheaper than your regular general.
I don't know. Slings are go buy a nice Sling 2 with like all the avionics, you're looking at like 200 grand, which is like,
Won't buy a sling, like.
Yeah.
But.
yeah, I don't know. Okay, shall we take a little break? Cool. Do like you guys want 5 minutes or 10 minutes? 10? Okay. Come back at 12:25. Give you 11 instead.
This is last night.
We've got a sheet, so her parents got it for her, and it's got the 392 Hemi in it, so it's the super fast one. And we were racing a Beamer down the Strand in it, and it blew a hole in the coolant line, and just started smoking everywhere.
Really?
Yeah, so I just ordered the new coolant line. I gotta pick it up because it's sitting on my trailer in front of her house.
Damn.
This summer, they're
Really?
projected to have a ruling, so. Final rule sometime, but I don't know if that means that's when they've established it as a regulation and written in. Or if that's whether they're gonna actually say, yes, let's do this.
If I had to take a guess, probably the latter. Probably gonna say,
Yeah,
yes,
so
this
we'll
is
see
when we'll
about
do it, and we'll see you guys in another year for the implementation.
Yeah, this is
Jesus. You said it was on the Strand?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, one of my friends, he had a, when I was going through buds. He's a stupid guy, but
He was going through both.
yeah, he was like,
I have a buddy.
we called him
who
mouth
went through
breather,
both.
like he was bad.
Yeah.
But he had, it wasn't like a,
Yeah.
it was like a Honda Civic or like the Subaru WRX. It was like one of those types of cars, and it was manual. It was so fast, and he was like, "You want to drive it?" I was like, "I mean, it's been a couple of years since I've driven manual." He's like, "Oh, you'll be fine." It's like around the neighborhood, like, okay, I know how to drive manual still. It's like, let's go to the Strand. Dude, it was like 11 p.m. He's like, just go. I went, and it was literally like we went 0 to like 150 in like it seemed like seconds.
Yeah.
Like it was so
It's
fast.
so much fun. It's fun, kid's a big heavy Jeep, and it's got the big old motor in it, so yeah, and it just pounds through gears, cause it's got the little selector on the side, where you can like. just
The
pound through it.
paddles.
It's got paddles and it's got the.
Oh,
selector
yeah,
down
yeah.
by The handle, the paddles are delayed by like 2 seconds, so like you hit it and then it shifts, like, it's like a second delay, which kinda sucks. But she's like still learning gears and stuff, so every time I drive, it's fun.
That was fun.
Yeah, my buddy, his dad owned Wash and Go, and they like sold it, the car wash company.
Mhm.
So he bought a Ferrari after that, 488 Spider. So cool. And he took me in it because I used to do all the maintenance and stuff on all their cars and everything. We were going so fast down the Strand, and it's got radar deflectors on every panel of the car.
No
so that
way,
you
really?
can't- Yeah, we flew by a cop that was sitting over at Fiddler's, and they won't even chase you. Once you're going a certain speed, it's like not even worth it, because they can't catch up to you.
That's like Tokyo Drift. I remember that movie. They're like,
Yeah,
"Are you worried about the cops?" And they're
Yeah.
like, "No, once you're over a certain speed, they won't do anything."
because they can't touch you. It was the craziest thing I've ever been in. That and then an i8 Roadster. With a hybrid V8, I think.
Yeah.
Twin turbo V8.
I don't think I've been in. Besides that one, craziest car I've been in was like maybe this is like pathetic, but it was probably like a Challenger like Scat Pack or something like that, a Charger Scat
Yeah,
Pack.
that's got
Which
the
is
same
still
motor.
fast.
It's the same motor that's in this Jeep.
Oh,
It's a 392 Hemi.
they're fast.
It's crazy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's insane. Yeah, I'm a car geek, so. I love it
Yeah.
all.
I don't identify as a car geek, but I definitely like it gets me going. Cars and guns.
Mhm.
And I bought an extra thing for my rifle last night. Did I show you a picture of the most recent one?
No.
Maybe, I don't know. I thought I showed you,
I
but
think you showed me one of them. It was the one where you were holding it, and it was like sunset or something like that.
yeah, so like that one.
Oh, yeah.
So I got what I got so far, or last night was for that EOTech riser or that EOTech, I got the riser for it. And like I'm gonna have to get one for the magnifier as well. But for now, I'll just take the magnifier off till I get it. But essentially it's like rather than having like the head tilt or like the turtleneck,
Yeah.
it's more of like a straight up sort of look.
Oh, it's smart.
Because it rises it up like that much.
Dang.
So you don't have to like hunch your head down. It's just like you
Yeah.
look through. It's like when you have like NVGs, like nods.
Yeah,
That's how they like are able to do it
Dang.
with the risers.
that is so cool.
So that one was like I got on sale for like $30 off, but the riser with the center for the magnifier is like
Oh, something that I don't know.
220. I was like, I'm not gonna buy that yet.
You gotta wait.
Yeah.
So you've got to recalibrate everything now? Or is it?
Not yet. The riser hasn't. I ordered it, so it hasn't shipped yet. But once that comes in, I'll have to like re-zero it. So and for
What do you zero it to?
um, I mean, as of lately, I've only they say like you should do like 50 yards.
Say, DRs should be a good amount.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I've only zeroed it at 25 because I've only been to the indoor range since I've gotten the EOTech. But once I get the riser, I'm gonna have to like go out to the desert and like shoot like 50 yards out.
Or you could go to the South Bay range. That's where I go. It's the outdoor range.
But I think that's partly just
How they have like a rifle range?
kind of
Huh.
yeah.
It's just called South Bay Range.
It's over in
Yeah. Still, it's frustrating.
South Bay Rod Gun Club. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know, that kind of stuff, and like,
I'm a member there right now. We used to go like every weekend. And you shoot on the same range as like everybody else. Like I shoot with everybody that's shooting like rifles.
And what they do, just like a ceasefire, you could go out, change your rifle or change your target. And
Yep. It's every like 15 minutes or every half hour. And
we had a range like that in Vegas, Clark County shooting complex. Massive, like it's all outdoor, but they have like a pistol range, they have the and rifle range next to each other, but they're like ran separately. Then they have a shotgun range, like skeet and like trap shooting. And you could go at night some nights, so they have like all the lights set up and it's just sick.
that's so rad.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't shot any rifles there yet. The only time we went and shot rifles, we went out to the BLM land. It's right
Okay.
before it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like right before it. There's a BLM out in Mole too. Right, right past the casino that they just built out there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's sketch. Like we were shooting there and it was really sketchy. Cause I mean, everybody's shooting like the way they're supposed to, but everybody's kind of starting to go like this once it gets towards the field.
Yeah.
And there's no legal guns there whatsoever.
There's
Everybody's-
a place in Ocotillo Wells, like Anza-Borrego area. It's called like Split Mountain Road, but there's an active train track that runs out there. So people just park their trucks right up against the train track and they just use the train track as like, all right, we are standing at the train track, nobody's moving forward. People are like pretty spaced out too, but that's like another 6 spot. It's just a little bit of a drive.
Yeah, usually when we go out there, we go like 2 to 3 miles off the road. Yeah. Just back into the mountains a little bit. See how far we can get back. But last time we went out, we found the perfect little area. It was just all held off and everything. See if I can find it.
We'll see. That's the plan right now. So. Just, I think it was good.
for sure, you're gonna like stay here, stay here.
Once I get counseling done, try to go to like EMT school. Okay. Try to do both at the same time. I'll say EMT said. That's all. It's basically like something that patient, the acting department, different part. Yeah. But. Sure. Yeah, all of these.
Check each other, that's exact, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if I would look good to like apply for a midnight. Sure. To have the right? Yeah. Be cool to what next to the requirement, like or count on something. Yeah.
That's the spot we went to last time. It's just like
Dots.
way back there.
Yeah.
We just bring all the trucks and
All the bikes.
yeah.
Guns. Yeah, dude, that's I love going out there, bringing my dirt bike, camping, shooting.
So fun. And it's so quiet.
Chicago or something, Mexico.
Once you go to the bathroom, I think it would start.
Oh, yeah. Last 2 months of it's not good press.
No.
I think it's the pass fail thing, that would make suggestions.
Let's see the rag.
I don't know, someone took it.
So, clean, give me.
Oh.
Oh.
I don't.
Someone tried it one time.
Oh, the.
Much better.
Okay.
All right, are we ready to move on? Does everybody feel maybe a little more, I know it's kind of like a speed run through these, but it's our second time seeing it, so does everybody feel a little more confident and understanding of the systems we've covered so far? Cool. So we'll move on to the starter system and the ignition system, not to be confused with each other. So like for the ignition system, you think put the keys in the ignition and turn. Well, it's not referring to that. It's referring to the process that's happening continuously while the engine is running. The starter system is what's going to actually be the process that occurs when turning on the engine. Purpose of it is that it rotates the engine components to initiate the engine startup. We do this by inserting the key and turning it, which completes a connection between the battery and the starter motor. The battery then causes the starter motor to turn a small gear, which then rotates a larger gear, which is connected to the crankshaft. The rotating crankshaft rotates a single magnet between the 24 stators, as we talked about earlier, which then generates power. This power goes back to a regulator, which then charges the battery. So that process right there is going to look like this. We have our battery. As we turn the key, it's going to complete this connection. That power from the battery will go to the starter motor, which is going to turn a smaller gear, then a larger gear, which turns the crankshaft that has the single magnet attached to it. And that's going to be between the internal generators, the 24 stators. From there, that power is going to be sent to the regulator and then back to the battery to charge. So this whole process just happens one time just to get the crankshaft spinning, and that sort of magnetic energy into mechanical energy. Make sense, everybody? So after the engine has started, you can turn the key to the left and pull out the key, and it's not going to shut the engine off. The key is simply just to complete the connection between the battery and starter motor. I remember my first, I think it was my first solo outside of the practice area, or sorry, outside of the traffic pattern into the practice area. I was obviously a little nervous, you know, I've sold one time before, it was only in the pattern, so like, this is my first time going out into the real world. And I like started the engine and went through all my checklists, whatever, started my engine. And then I was gonna close the canopy because, you know, I wasn't comfortable enough to like hold the canopy and do everything else. I just decided to close it and latch it, closed it, wouldn't turn. And I was like, what the? I like look up and it's like locked. I'm like, no way. So I shut down the engine, do the engine shutdown checklist, take the key out, put it in, unlock it, then I latch the canopy. And afterwards I found out, oh, you don't have to remove you don't have to shut down the engine and remove the key, just take it out. And I was like, really? Yeah. So keep that in mind. If you end up accidentally locking the canopy and you can't close and latch it after you start the engine, just take the key out and then reach up and unlock. Don't drop the keys from the prop wash, but you can just go and do your thing and unlock it. So good little piece of information to have. The ignition system. So this is what's happening continuously to keep the engine going. Our ignition system, which hopefully in the POH, the new updated POH, they talk a little more about this process. But our ignition system is called a dual contactless capacitor discharge magneto-type ignition system. So it's kind of a mouthful. Dual contactless capacitor discharge magneto-type ignition system. For the engine to continue to run, the ECU demands a spark from the spark plug. So that's what's happening during this process. There's going to be a switch, which is controlled by the ECU, which allows the battery to send 12 volts to an ignition coil. That ignition coil is just an iron core wrapped in copper wiring. There's 4 ignition coils total, 1 per cylinder. The process that takes place is the electromagnetic induction theory. Friction in the ignition coil causes a magnetic field to collapse, which creates 40,000 volts. So on a smaller scale of this, imagine socks on, dragging your feet on the carpet, and then you touch a piece of metal and it creates like a little spark. Very similar concept. 40,000 volts is sent through a primary and secondary wiring. The secondary wiring leads to 2 spark plugs, because we have 2 per cylinder, which then create a spark in the cylinder. Any excess voltage that's not needed by the spark plugs are sent through 2 capacitors, which steps down the voltage and releases it back to the battery as needed. And that's so we're not sending 40,000 volts to a 12-volt battery. This is sort of what it looks like. It looks kind of funky. It's supposed to be animated, but because we're using Google Slides and not PowerPoint, let's see, maybe I could restore it. Because I want to show you the work that I'm proud of.
Doing it for a week.
Say what?
Doing it for a week.
Okay, I don't know
I
about a week,
remember
but
that. You just like sit down and it's like, dang it, it's not working, man.
do this. So first, you guys see this? Yeah. I know Ollie on Zoom, you can't see this, but all this is the animation of what we've already covered. So this is for a starter. Boom, key turned. Completes the connection that allows power to go to the starter motor, which then starts turning those gears, turn the crankshaft with the magnet between the internal generators. Boom, that generates power, goes to the regulator. Boom, regulator, back to the battery. So that's that one. The next one is going to be the ignition system. So that process we just talked about, continuously happening. This switch is closed, which is controlled by the ECU. It determines when to complete that connection. Battery 12 volts is sent from the ignition coil or to the ignition coil. Boom. Let me replay that so you guys can see it. Power sent to the ignition coil. Boom. There's that. That then sends 40,000 volts, secondary wiring, boom, spark plugs, ignition. And then any excess goes to the capacitor, back to the battery, and that process continues. So that is what that looks like.
Can you pull up the ignition system slide? Like that.
Cool. So that is what that process looks like. Just imagine it happening a little faster, not a slow down. But that's going to be the ignition system. Any questions, comments, concerns, complaints about the ignition system or starter system? Or if you notice anything that you're like, yeah, that was wrong, let me question that.
So there's 4 ignition coils, right? Is each of them sending 10,000 volts? For a
No,
combined
it should
40,000
be 40,000 per ignition coil.
per ignition coil?
Yeah. So those are like the main systems. We had oil, fuel, electrical, starter, and ignition. When I went through my training, a lot of these systems weren't really well known, like the starter and the ignition system weren't ones that were really taught. They weren't anything I talked about in my private pilot check ride, but should have because they're pretty important. They only were electrical and fuel and the oil. So now you guys are more knowledgeable than I was at your phase.
Is that what, or you've got? Is that what you know, like all this for the check ride or prepared?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can ask it.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't sure if they're gonna now ask the ignition system or.
I don't know, but Corey in particular is not like that.
It's just
So.
if you're gonna get in an airplane, well, I'm a firm believer you should know more than you actually need to know. You should show up to every single check ride more prepared than you need to be. But then on sort of a safety level, like you're coming here to choose to fly planes, do you want to scrape by and just know the surface level basics of how an airplane works? Like you're literally flying a machine that moves through the air. I don't want to just know oh, this is the horn, this is how I do the turn signal, like, I wanna know everything there is about it and how it works, so that's why I've sort of learned all the systems, that if you ask about any part of the plane, I can tell you like, oh, this is what this does, this is what system it's associated with, except for the feed pump, but but everything else, you want to know more than you need to. And it's something too that I feel like a lot of people have been implementing and like trying to like learn. Cause like when my class learned the ignition system and the star system, like this was like after instrument or like at the end of instrument, we learned about it. Then now I feel like it's more common practice for like newer students to have this knowledge. And it's really not that complex, like sure it's
Yeah, I'm just looking at like what, I have limited resources, time and effort, and so I look at.
limited
what's the-
resources and time,
what's the
fuel
Utility,
and electrical.
the utility, so that's like, I kind of look at it, if there's utility, like. Obviously the check ride, if there's utility for that, if there's utility in like me flying, like. I can actually better identify something that's going on, I just don't know that, like, if it doesn't start, like
Yeah.
starter systems, so
I would say the utility would just be using it on a check ride.
Okay.
Like you're not gonna, or if you forget to unlock the canopy and, maybe knew more about this, you could know you don't have to shut down. You can just take the key out because it's only needed for that initial connection. So
Cool.
it's exactly right there. Like the more you know, the better. If I would have known more than I needed to know, I would have not made a fool of myself and shut down the plane and then restarted. So you'll find little applications here and there, but check ride is going to be the big one because the ACS says that you should know all systems about your airplane. So the DPE can ask about the ignition system if they want to. That's totally up to them, their discretion.
How'd you manage to have it locked? If you had to get into it?
Do what?
How'd you manage to have the canopy locked if you had to open it, get into it? Or was it already open?
It was one of those things, it was already open. It was like the keys can turn really easy. So like if you like put it in and you let go, that like momentum can turn the key back and then it just pulls out and you think it's unlocked because you just unlocked it, but realistically it just relocked itself. Yeah.
Got it. What do you need to bring with you on your check rides?
To bring with you,
Like when you're doing the,
oral or flight, I would have physical copy of your checklist, your POH, your FAR aim. I would have paper sectional and TAC charts, updated, of course. Chart supplements, updated. Then I brought my like sectional plotter, my manual and electronic E6B, the FAR aim, I don't know if I said that, FAR aim tabbed, POH tabbed. I think that was really the only like documents and like hardware I brought. And then like I had like my check ride binders, like all my documents, like aircraft documents, weight and balance. Pretty much the whole pave I had in a binder.
you just printed everything off?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's quite better.
If every check ride was $1,500, I probably spent $1,600 with like all the printing and stuff that I did. Came like very overly prepared.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that coming overly prepared as far as like how many, supplemental resources you have are going to make a difference, but being very, very organized, very, very prepared and doing it the same check ride preparation the same way every time definitely was a contributing factor to having like passed all the check rides. Like organization and being prepared is very, very important. It also looks good to the DPE.
Mm.
So.
Great.
Yep. Well, we can, before we end, I want to show you this. So those lane A and lane B sensors, if you have a lane A failure or lane B failure, these are the resultant sensor failures that you'll have with it. So if lane A is not working and you have that lane A light on, you should see red X's over some of these things. And vice versa, if lane B is not working, you should have red X's over these until you recycle, turn it back on, and then that lane light disappears. So if nobody has any questions, we can end it here. Otherwise, I'm more than willing to answer any questions or talk about any sort of like emergency scenarios. If anybody just wants to think of, oh, well, what if this happens? What would we do? We can
I got an emergency scenario, that one gave me this and I couldn't figure out the answer to it. So I was on a flight from, let's just say Santa Rosa to Monterey Bay. And he told me it was foggy there, coastal fog came in and covered the whole area. All along that side of the mountain, so, and he said, what would you do in this scenario? If it required to land within that area, you had a meeting you're supposed to get to. And it was all fogged up.
fuck the meeting.
I said I'd make a 180, go back to the airport that I initially, back to the home airport, Nashville. He said, nope, you can't, it's fogged up on that side too. And I'm like, well, then, I said, what are our fuel, limits? He said, you got full fuel. And he said, it was fogged up on both sides of the mountain, all on the coast and on the side of this, I don't know what it's called.
Basin.
Yeah, basically. And I couldn't figure out what to do because all the airports were fogged in, he said. Then he said I ended up losing radios. And my guess was to, tune into a VOR, to nearest airport with their conditions. Then he told me, no, that one's fogged up too. So like, what would you do in that situation? Would you fly over another, set of mountains to get to clear weather or? what?
Yeah, so with any situation, there's certain questions you have to ask. Am I currently in IMC conditions or not? No, I'm in VFR. Cool, then I'm gonna maintain visual flight rules and stay VFR. Two, as I think you already said, how's my fuel? I'm full fuel. Okay, so I'm not in emergency situations where I have no fuel. So I have time to think about what I'm gonna do. If you try to go back to your original airport's fog, your destination airport's fog, and the surrounding airports are fog, you are going to have to find an airport that is VFR. Now, at that point, if for some reason, well, one, you shouldn't have put yourself in the situation to begin with, right?
Yeah.
We have weather forecasts and stuff like that, so you should be able to see when like all surrounding airports are gonna be IFR and fog. Yeah, I would just probably climb to a higher altitude. I would determine which airport I want to go to, so by listening to different ATISes, seeing what's reporting VFR. And then as you mentioned, we can't, so that's another thing, lost comms. Can we hear or can we not transmit? If we can't transmit, but we can still hear, then I would listen to ATIS, get the weather, find VFR airport. Then I would go squawk 7600 and do the normal lost comm procedures. But if we couldn't hear anything, then you start using your like external resources. Do you have service on your phone? Can you go on ForeFlight and see what the nearest VFR airport is? If so, go direct there, squawk 7600, the normal lost comm procedures. So I'm a believer with emergency situations, there's no one set procedure to do. We have like our checklist, which says to do certain things. But when you're in that situation, you're gonna have to like really think about your different options and see what works. So that's what I would do is I would climb to a higher altitude, try to see where I can see VFR, no fog. Start flying that direction, see if I could get ATIS, if I can't, get the weather in a different way. And then squawk 7600 and fall through with the lost comm situations. What was the answer he was looking for?
He was looking for flying to the nearest airport with VFR weather.
Yeah, see? Yeah, climb to a higher altitude, see where the nearest airport of VFR is, and go.
And I guess the airports I provided were the ones he was looking for. He wanted me to fly into an airport that, if I was in that situation, that I wasn't familiar with landing in.
Hmm. Okay, well, in that situation, what kind of fog would you be seeing on the coast?
Whew, go back to the weather, huh? Fogs, coastal fog, right?
Which is known as,
Let me go back in my, my random access memory files. Is that not advection?
the other, huh?
That's advection.
What'd you say? Yeah, advection. So advection fog, if we see fog on the coast, it's most likely going to be advection fog. Or if it's windy and it's not advection fog, then it's low stratus clouds, right? So with that being said, if you're trying to think where's an airport that would be VFR, it would be somewhere on the other side of the hills, a little more inland, away from the coast. So that's where you can assume your best bet would be for a VFR airport.
So would you just like land at that airport and kind of have to wait for the fog to go away
Yeah,
and then just wait to come out?
yeah. Although if you had lost comms, meaning there was something wrong with your radios, I probably wouldn't take off again, knowing that there's something wrong.
If you had lost comms and like the nearest airport, let's say you're in an emergency, engine out, lost comms too. Near the airport is uncontrolled, would you go for that? Or if there's a close airport in proximity that's towered, would you choose that option?
That's a good question.
I feel like it kind of just be up to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you go to the untowered airport, a lot of people at untowered airports don't use their radios, right? So you'd have to be very, very vigilant with keeping your visual scan going outside and then following the untowered airport procedures. So like try not to do a straight in, try to enter at a 45-degree angle to the downwind and like follow it appropriately and like really be conscious of like, all right, there's nobody on the runway, nobody taxiing. I don't see anybody on final or in the traffic pattern. And then go and land. The towered airport, you obviously might get a little more help from the tower, but that adds a few extra steps, like they'll clear everybody out for you, but now you have to make sure that you like squawk 7600, overfly traffic pattern, looking for those light gun signals, know what the light gun signals are. So yeah, it's kind of just dependent on you, I guess.
I actually want to go uncontrolled now. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially if it's not like super busy.
Yeah, I think me personally, I would rather go to an uncontrolled just because they're usually not as busy. But that's just my personal opinion and how I would go about that. All right. Time is up. I hope today was a good review of systems. We didn't get around to the questions. So I say tomorrow we start the class off with doing the King's School practice questions in aerodynamics. We will end the class with that. We'll start with that. And then the second half, we can talk about things from the practice questions.
All right. Thanks, man.
Cool.
Good learning.
Good learning. All right, my Zoom folk. Adios. Inshallah.